So it is now 7:03. Good evening. I'd like to call the April 29th, 2021 meeting of the Douglas, Sutton, and Uxbridge Planning Boards to order. My name is Trish Settles. I am the Deputy Director of Regional Collaboration and Community Planning with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, also known as CMRPC. I'm joined tonight by Principal Planner Carrie Salwa, who will be helping me facilitate this. We are the regional planning agency for 40 communities in southern Worcester County that include these three communities. We've been asked to facilitate the meeting this evening on behalf of these three towns. And my apologies, I've somehow or another have lost my COVID statement. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, certain provisions of the and the emergency order of March 12, 2020, certain provisions of the open meeting law have been exempted. This meeting is being held remotely via Zoom. To join the meeting, visit www.zoom.us/JOIN and enter the webinar ID. One moment, I have it here. Sorry. The webinar ID 859-9034-8184, or by phone 646. Oops, I don't have that one here handy. Or by phone 646-558-8656. This meeting is being recorded. And may be available and may be rebroadcast on community cable or YouTube. With this Zoom webinar format, only panelists and board members will have active video. Everyone will be muted unless and until it is their turn to present or they've been acknowledged by facilitators. Again, this is a joint hearing of the application of Scannell Properties of Indianapolis, Indiana, for construction of approximately 640,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility to be located in properties on each of these three towns. Various relief permits, exemptions are sought in each town. This meeting has been duly posted by each of the three towns. The electronic file of the application materials can be viewed at https://tinyurl.com/BL Google Drive, or by requested by emailing 3town planning board hearing at cmrpc.org, the email address behind my head. At this time, we're going to confirm that we have a quorum of each of the three boards by doing a roll call, a vote. When I say your name, you'll affirm your attendance stating aye. We'll start with the Douglas Planning Board, who is attending largely via Zoom from the town of Douglas. We have Ernie Marks Jr.
Here.
Thank you. Tracy Sharkey?
She's dialing in late.
Not yet. Thank you. Michael Greco?
Here.
Jacob Schultzberg?
Aye.
Aaron Sokrat?
Here.
Thank you. Leslie Stevens?
Aye.
And Michael Zwicker?
Aye. And also,
Thank you. We have a quorum in the town of Douglas. They're also supported by their town staff person, interim town planner from CMRPC, Ian McElwee.
Here.
And I believe they're also joined by Bob Manerick, Economic Development Coordinator for the town of Douglas.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum and support. For the town of Sutton, Wally Baker,
Aye.
Michael Gagan,
Aye.
Bob Largess.
Bob is not here.
Not here. Scott Paul,
Is not here.
Kyle Bergeson,
Is not here.
Bill Talcott.
here.
So you have a bare quorum. It's a 5-member board.
Thank you. And they're supported by town planner Jen Hager, who is supporting Bill Talcott on his remote access. Thank you. We have a quorum.
I am present.
Here, there you go. We have a quorum for the town of Sutton. For Uxbridge, Barry Desrousseau.
Here.
Jim Smith,
Here.
Barry Hawk,
Aye.
Eli Lavadier,
Here.
Joe Leonardo,
Here.
and they're supported by Michael Gallerani.
Here.
Thank you. We have a
Amy's
quorum,
on as well.
and Amy is on as well. Thank you. We have a
No,
quorum. for the-
Amy's not on. That's actually Jim Smith.
Oh, oh, this
First
is
it was
it.
Barry,
All right.
now it's Jim.
Okay.
Everybody's got
Another
Amy's.
crazy looking Amy.
Jim's, can you change that for us, Carrie? There we go. Thank you. We do have a quorum for the town of Buxbridge. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion from each of the three boards to accept the minutes that were taken by Jen Hager from our last meeting on April 15th. Do I have a motion from the town of Douglas?
Make a motion to accept those minutes as written. Second.
And who made the motion?
Mark Zwicker.
Thank you, Mike. And who seconded it?
Aaron Sokrat.
Thank you. I'll do a roll call vote of the membership. Ernie Marks,
Aye.
Tracy Sharkey, not yet there. Michael Greco,
Aye.
Jacob Schultzberg,
Aye.
Aaron Sokrat,
Aye.
Les Stevens,
Aye.
and Michael Zwicker.
Aye.
The minutes of April 15th have passed by the Douglas Planning Board. I'll now entertain a motion of the Sutton Planning Board to accept the minutes of April 15, 2021.
This is Michael Gagan. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from April 15th, 2021.
Thank you. And is there a second?
This is Wally Baker, and I'll second it.
Thank you. And a roll call vote, Wally Baker,
Aye.
Michael Gagan,
Aye.
Bob Largess has not joined us.
Don't tell.
Bill Talcott is the aye. The motion passes by the Sutton Planning Board that's present. Thank you. Do I have a motion from the Uxbridge Planning Board to accept the minutes of April 15, 2021?
I'll
I'll
make a
make the
motion.
motion to accept the minutes.
Eli from Uxbridge made the motion. Is there a second?
I second Barry Hawk.
Thank you. And a roll call vote. Barry Desrousseau,
Aye.
Each member of the family, including their 12-year-old daughters.
Jimmy, aye.
thank
Can you hear
you.
me?
Yeah, we got you. Little background noise there. Jim
All right,
Smith.
sorry.
Aye.
Wait, did we get a second? Sorry, I'm taking
Yeah,
this
you
out of
did.
order.
Barry Huck did.
Barry Huck, second. And a roll call vote. Barry Desrousseau. Barry, can you vote on the motion? Sorry, you made the motion. Did you also?
No, I didn't make the motion.
Who made the motion? Sorry,
I-
Aye.
Eli made the motion. Barry Hawk seconded it.
I
oh,
got
and
it.
you voted for it. Got it. I'm back on.
Got it.
I'm back on track.
All
Jim
right.
Smith.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Barry Hawk,
Aye.
Eli Lavadier,
Aye.
Joe Leonardo,
Aye.
and the motion carries in the town of Uxbridge to accept the minutes of April 15, 2021. All right, we have a quorum of the participating boards. We passed the minutes of the previous meeting. I just want to verify on the record that everything has been sent out from each of the boards to post this meeting. I think that is correct. We're here tonight for a continuation of the joint public hearing of the boards of Douglas, Sutton, and Uxbridge. It was opened originally on February 11. On our first meeting on February 11, we were provided a project overview by the developer. On March 14th, the hearing date was focused on architecture, civil engineering, and other bylaw compliance. I think I skipped one in there, sorry. My printer's leaving out lines. On February 25th, is that right? 25th, we focused largely on traffic and transportation. The March 25th was solely a request for a continuation by the project proponent approved by the planning boards of Douglas and Sutton. Last meeting that we had on April 15th that was just approved was largely the developer responding to comments from previous meetings, generally on civil engineering and architecture. Tonight's meeting will be focused largely on traffic and transportation comments, responding traffic and transportation responses to previous comments. Again, this meeting is being recorded and the minutes are being taken by Jen Hager of Sutton. I believe In the event that there is a Zoom bomb or other disruptions, please remain on the call. Our staff will work rapidly to isolate the offending party so that we may continue the hearing. In this Zoom webinar format, we're asking that if you wish to speak, to hit the raise your hand button on the bottom, and we will then recognize you to speak. So we're going to start this evening. I'm going to turn it over at this point to Todd Brodeur from Fletcher Tilton, counsel for the developer, and he can introduce his team.
Thanks, Trish, and good evening, everybody. And thank you again to all the board members, the consultants, and the staff from each of the towns that made their way here tonight again for another hearing in our process. Just a quick update. Since the last time we met, the development team has been working on letters responding to each of the comment letters that we've received, each of email comments that were sent in to various boards, and also the peer review comments. So we've done a series of responses, which are really putting into writing a lot of the items that we've talked about during the hearing process. So there's not a tremendous amount of new information in those letters. There is some, and you'll hear about a lot of those items here tonight when we start to talk about traffic, and then try to wrap up some of those open items that we've had kind of hanging out there. So we did talk through a lot of the topics at the last meeting, but we didn't get to traffic, and Vinod has been anxiously awaiting his turn here. So I'm going to turn it over to Vinod from VHB, and we're going to touch upon traffic again.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Trish. Again, for the record, my name is Vinod Kalikiri. I'm a senior transportation engineer planner with VHB, with offices in Worcester on Front Street. Zachary from the project team, I believe he's going to be running the slideshow. Zachary, would you be able to share your screen?
I would love to.
Thank you.
I need to be provided that. Right. Okay, if you could help me. I can't. It's still telling me that I'm disabled.
Oh, I'll try again.
So while that's getting set up, so the plan for today, as Trish mentioned, we went through a very long presentation and follow-up discussion on the January traffic study, that January 2021 traffic study that we filed as part of our site plan application to the three towns. Since then, since that hearing, we've had a lot of discussions, dialogues. There were a lot of comment letters, as Todd mentioned. There's peer review comments from GPI, the independent peer review consultant that the three towns brought in to review the traffic study for this project. We've been coordinating with them, generated a couple of rounds of responses. And so what I'm hoping to do today is go through some of the key elements of the updated traffic information that was not part of the February presentation that I made. So the intent is to demonstrate through these slides and hopefully the follow-up discussion that we have pretty much addressed most of the items that were presented through the comment letters and the prior discussions. And hopefully with the discussion tonight, we'll be able to close out any open items. So with that, next slide, please. So as we were looking at the site right off of Lackey Dam Road. Next slide. So to keep the presentation kind of streamlined, I thought the best way to kind of present the information tonight would be to kind of group the comments or the items into essentially 5 buckets, items 1 through 5 that you see on the list. Again, there were tons of comments, multiple comment letters from various sources. So we're going to group them into what I would call as the biggest one that involved a lot of analysis and updates and changes to our assumptions. I would put all of that under in a bucket called sensitivity analysis. So we had made certain assumptions on various things like trucks and what roads they take and how many vans, or will there be vans on the site, and how many employees. So as part of the sensitivity analysis, we tested the findings and the results and impacts to see how sensitive the results are to changes in those assumptions, knowing that there isn't a tenant, but we, between Scannell and the project team, we've done a lot of these projects. So we have a lot of understanding, a good understanding of how these tenants operate and the types of tenants that would occupy a site at such a location. So we were able to run analysis by changing some of our assumptions, kind of bookending, the lowest to the highest percentages that we could come up with for some of those assumptions to see how the intersections and roadways operate and function with those changes in assumptions. So that's a big part of the analysis and the review that we did with input from GPI over the last couple of months. We looked at the trip generation analysis, another big area that we've discussed, without knowing a tenant, how would we come up with a reasonable framework for understanding the impacts of the project, and how can we have systems in place to monitor the actual operations after the fact, after a tenant has been identified. So there are aspects of the comments that relate to that. Then there are some comments that relate to offsite traffic improvements, what we had started with in the original traffic study. Are there other things that we should be looking at both at this time as well as in the future, based on the findings of the monitoring, traffic monitoring that will be done? There's some comments related to parking, how much parking, where it's located, whether it's truck parking, employee parking, van parking. So we had a series of comments addressing that. And then there were some site plan comments related to access and circulation and queue stacking. And I would put all of those in a bucket of site plan related comments. So we have, between the next several slides, you'll see some text bullets that address a lot of these items, but also towards the end of the presentation, some plan views that address especially items related to 4 and 5 in this list. So on the sensitivity analysis, so one of the key areas of comments or concern that we've heard on several comment letters was, what happens if trucks do not get on enough, 100% of the trucks don't go on to 146? What happens if some of those trucks stay on local roads and head down Lackey Dam Road, down Gilboa? More importantly, the key intersection in Douglas, which in this area, which is the Gilboa Street, North Street intersection. That was actually GPI's one of the focal points for the review, the truck impacts on local streets. Next slide, please. So we looked at that in quite a bit of detail. This is a slide from the original presentation, again, with the understanding of how this site will operate based on the types of tenants that would be interested in this site. The expectation is that majority of the traffic would be heading north towards the Mass Pike on 146, and then a little over a third of it might be oriented to the south towards I-95 on 146. We go to the next slide. Based on discussions with GPI and looking at the demographic and the distribution of traffic in the area, even though we did not expect 10% of the traffic staying on local roads, we tested the analysis to see what happens to the operations at the Gilboa Street, North Street intersection if 10% of the trucks associated with the site did not get on to 146 and they were to travel through local streets. Next slide, please. And this is a view of that intersection, Gilboa at North Street. It's kind of a unique geometry or traffic control with only 3 legs of the intersection controlled by stop sign. The view here is heading from 146 towards North Street, where there is no stop sign control. The left turns here are the heaviest movements onto North Street, and then the right turns from north onto Gilboa are also pretty heavy during the peak times. So we ran the analysis, collected new data, and we have updated our numbers to reflect usage of this intersection by trucks. Next slide, please. So the other aspect of the sensitivity analysis that I mentioned was looking at the mix of vehicles. Again, if depending on the types of tenants, what happens if there's a van-based delivery operation on the site. That was one of the assumptions we made in the original traffic study. The question was, what happens if it was all truck-based operation? There were no van deliveries. So we zeroed out the van deliveries in the sensitivity analysis and said what happens if all of those vehicles were trucks? So we updated the analysis using that and several other parameters that GPI had comments about. We tested those assumptions as well with changes. Next slide, please. So the overall, kind of in a nutshell, I guess, with all the technical analysis data that were built into the response document that GPI has reviewed since, the overall finding is that when you take out actually van trips from the analysis, van trips are the ones that are actually on the local road. So we started with that analysis saying that, if there was a van-based operation, we would have local roads being used by vans. But when you take out those numbers, in fact, we would actually be reducing the volume of traffic traveling on local streets, even with the higher volume of trucks. And that reduces the impacts on those intersections. But even the heavier volume of trucks going on and off of 146, our analysis shows that there's adequate capacity at the ramp intersections, which are under control by Mass DOT. There's enough capacity to handle that traffic. The left turn lane into the site that's proposed as part of the project on Lackey Dam Road. We tested that to make sure that the heavier truck percentages of truck volumes can be supported by the turn lane. And that's been confirmed as part of our revised analysis. And overall, again, with minor tweaks in the numbers and the changes that we're looking at, there isn't any additional traffic mitigation that would be triggered as part of this project. The mitigation that we had in the original traffic study would be adequate when you're bookending the analysis with different numbers that we looked at. Next slide, please. The other aspect of the analysis we looked at, as I mentioned, was the trip generation, the actual number of vehicular trips that would be generated, and whether it's van-based versus trailer truck operations, and how the numbers would change for a warehouse distribution use, knowing that this would not be one of the heavier last mile facilities that would generate higher volumes of traffic that some other facilities might generate. The analysis is consistent with Scannell's expectation of how these sites would operate and the types of tenants that they would attract to the site. And the methodology that we use at the end of the day, given Mass DOT's jurisdiction on the site as well, is consistent with what the state uses for analysis and review of this project. There's a slide later on where you see some of the feedback we received from Mass DOT in relation to the traffic analysis. Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. So through the process, again, while we were going through the process with the towns, we've been in communication as part of our NEPA process and ongoing review by Mass DOT. We've had several conversations with Mass DOT staff since our filing of this project with NEPA. The certificates that have been issued by NEPA with input from Mass DOT have indicated that the state concurs with the methodology, the assumptions, the impact analysis, and the findings. And just before our last meeting, I'd reached out, just before we filed our final EIR on March 15th, and Mass DOT indicated that they did not have any pending traffic items to discuss at that point. They had indicated that everything's been covered. So the remaining step actually on the state side of this process is to file an access permit application with design plans for the turn lane improvements that would be implemented on Lackey Dam Road. That section of road is under Mass DOT jurisdiction. So we'll be seeking their approval to implement those improvements pending completion of the rest of the review. Next slide, please. So to summarize the offsite traffic improvements that the comments, I guess, related to offsite improvements that were made by GPI. The sensitivity analysis demonstrated that the improvements, especially the left turn lane, will remain adequate, that the queues would not spill past the length of the turn lane that's being proposed. There's no need for a right turn lane on Lackey Dam Road to turn onto the site from the north, especially because the traffic oriented to and from the north, essentially into Uxbridge and Northbridge, is relatively small compared to the traffic that would be on and off of 146. The changes in the numbers do not trigger the need for any improvements at the ramps or locations that are under Mass DOT jurisdiction. There will be a transportation demand management program that will be in place. Both the state as well as the town's reviews have indicated that those types of measures would be needed, and the applicant is willing to implement them. And then there will be a multi-year post-construction monitoring, and this will be enforced by Mass DOT as well as part of their permits. Next slide, please. So at this point, I have a few graphics here that relate to some of the site plan related comments. So one of the comments or questions that we had was whether the driveway coming off of Lackey Dam Road into the site is adequate to support the traffic that would go into the property. And more specifically, when there are trucks that are trying to come into the driveway and make a right turn, is there adequate room for passenger cars heading towards the employee parking lot? That is the driveway design adequate to handle all of the traffic? And what you see on this graphic, if you can see it on my screen, the trucks would be in the right lane going into the site and turning right into the driveway towards the security gate there. And then there are 2 lanes at that location for trucks to enter the site. And adjacent to that lane, the entry drive lane where the trucks are entering, there's a separate lane that allows employee vehicles. Obviously, the turns would be in a single lane, but once the vehicle turns, there is a separate lane for passenger cars to follow the red dot that you see on the screen to enter the employee parking lot. And then there's a third lane, that exits. That's an exit lane coming out of the site. And what you have on this plan, and this, we'll be submitting this as part of our record, the truck turning templates show that vehicles in each of those lanes can operate independent of each other without overlapping of their paths. Essentially, you'd have a 3-lane cross section on the site driveway to accommodate all the movements that you're seeing here. Next slide, please. Based on GPI's request, we've also run truck turning templates through the back of the property where we have turns around the corners of the building, the backside, as well as turning into the parking lot, the surface parking lot on the north side of the property. And all of these turns clear the corners without any encroachment or overlaps. Next slide, please. Another comment related to parking. Graphic is oriented slightly differently on this, but the north parking lot is on the left side of this graphic. The question was, what happens if there is a tenant on the site that requires more employee parking than what's shown on the front of the property? So what you see here is an alternate layout. The intent is not to stripe it like this at this point or to put in that much employee parking in the back. But the intent of this graphic is to show that the north parking lot is flexible enough to be striped based on the actual tenant needs. And this shows quite a bit of additional employee parking that can go into that north parking lot. And should that be the case, if there is a tenant who requires additional parking or more parking than what is shown on the south side of the building, and we put more parking on the north side, there would be an employee access on the north side of the building. You see those two black lines. Those are the crosswalks that go from the employee parking lot on the north side to the building, and there would be building access on that face of the building. But again, that's tenant dependent. So once the tenant is identified, there's enough flexibility in the site design, whether it's impervious area calculations, drainage, stormwater, truck turning, access, circulation. All of this is being designed to accommodate and be flexible for a range of tenants that could be on the property. Next slide, please. So there was some question about snow removal. And again, this is the north parking lot. what you see right along the perimeter of the paved area along this north parking lot is the snow storage, 5 to 10 feet of snow storage, but also for larger snow events, it's actually right at the top corner, right under the word snow. There's a big area where snow can be moved off of the parking lots and into that area should there be a need to do so. Next slide, please.
Sorry, do you want to point
Exactly.
out the trailer? Do you want to point out the trailer snow removal area?
Yep. Yeah. So there's. Yep. Next slide. So one of the comments related to providing pedestrian connections to the security or the guard shack area, and this plan, the site plan has been modified to provide that pedestrian connection through the employee parking lot, so that the security staff can actually, when they leave, have a defined path to get into the employee parking lot and then into the building. And then the site design has also been modified to accommodate EV-ready parking spaces, up to 18 parking spaces that are generally in the area pointed by the red dot on the screen. So those spaces would be available and ready to be furnished with EV chargers based on the need. But the infrastructure needed to implement EV charging will be implemented as part of this project at 18 of the parking spaces. Next slide, please. So overall, based on the review of GPI, the 2 rounds of review, there were a series of recommendations that came out of the GPI peer review that's listed here. The applicant has agreed to adopt or implement all of these measures. The first one being the Gilboa Street, North Street intersection. GPI had pointed out certain things that could be done to address some of the existing deficiencies related to signage and pavement marking changes to make sure drivers have the right information as they navigate that intersection. So that'll be part of the mitigation for the project. We'll be providing, once we know the tenant, once we know the tenant for the facility, we'll be providing data related to their operations, so we could compare that with operations that we had assumed in the traffic study and the traffic analysis. The applicant will be constructing a turn lane on Lackey Dam Road, so the traffic flow on Lackey Dam Road is not interrupted by vehicles turning into the site. There'll be a post-construction traffic monitoring program for several years after occupancy. And this would also be a requirement through the state review process. The project will include an area for clearing snow for outgoing trailers. That was one of the comments that was noted as part of the GPI review, and I recall that was discussed at the last meeting as well. And as I just pointed out, there will be 18 EV-ready parking spaces that can be set up with chargers when the demand is there for that technology on the site. Finally, I think there are a few remaining items at this stage on the traffic side of things from review and permitting. There were some recommendations from GPI on what to include in a traffic monitoring study. So we'll have to work out the details on the specifics of that traffic monitoring program. As I mentioned, we need to seek a DOT access permit for the implementation of the improvements. They're in front of the 3 towns now for our approvals. And then would actually be, as I mentioned, we'll be submitting a study, a report comparing the operations of an actual tenant with the assumptions that we made. And then we'll also include a post-construction monitoring study over a period of several years to ensure that the numbers that we have projected in the study remain valid going forward. I think that covers the summary of the traffic updates that we've gone through since the last hearing, and we'll be glad to answer any questions.
For note, just before Trish, before it goes back out, just a quick follow-up. Vinod mentioned the snow clearing area for the trailers, and we kind of breezed over that on the site plan. I don't know, Zachary, if you want to back up a few slides and just point that out very quickly, but I just wanted to make the point that it's on, yep, this is the slide, and the trailer there with the red dot, that's the trailer snow removal area. This is on the latest site plans that have been submitted as revised plans, I think as of yesterday. So these are on the plan set that is now the latest version that's with the towns. So, with that, Trish, I think, Vinod did a great job there, kind of pinning down some of those issues, but we'd love to hear from folks if they have continued questions or comments, and we'd
Sure.
love to hear from people.
Sure. So I recognize that Barry has his hand up, but and we'll get to that. I just want to recognize that I know that we have Rebecca Brown on. I wanted to know if she had any particular questions she'd like to follow up with. Rebecca, do you have any from Greenman Peterson as the peer consultant for the 3 towns? Rebecca?
Yep, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, for some reason it's not letting me turn on my video, but at least you can hear me anyway. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right. Yeah, so no real questions or anything. I think actually Vinod did a pretty good job summarizing. We had already provided our additional responses to his analysis that he presented tonight back on the April 13th, which we did get additional analysis and responses back from him as of last night that essentially addressed all of our recommendations. So in our last round, we had provided some recommendations for some improvements for scope of the monitoring study that could be done. And the applicant has agreed to do all of those improvements. I think the one area that I did want to note was related to the Gilboa Street and North Street intersection, where we had previously asked them to add that intersection to their study area. They did collect counts there and did an analysis of that study area intersection, which did indicate a limited impact as a result of the project in terms of traffic operations, where it was only expected to increase delay by up to 7 seconds on any of the approaches, with minimal increases to the queues. But we did note that based on their crash data analysis that they did, that intersection does have a crash rate that's above the statewide and district-wide averages. Upon a field visit, we noted a number of things that are deficient for some low-cost improvements that Vinod mentioned that could be done there to help improve the situation, including one of the approaches to the intersection has an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, so there's no stop on that approach. And we recommended installing some pedestrian crossing signage at that location. It is also an awkward intersection in that it has a 3-way traffic control, which sometimes can be a little bit confusing to people. So we recommended some additional signage to accentuate the 3-way traffic control. You've probably seen those where there's a sign that notifies you that one of the directions does not stop. So people aren't expecting someone to stop as they're coming from the east on Gilboa Street coming through the intersection. One of the other things that we noted is there is a sidewalk along the north side of Gilboa Street that is an asphalt sidewalk. And it was actually shown in the picture that Vinod brought up of the intersection. There's just a slight asphalt curb that has a limited reveal to it that separates that sidewalk from the edge of the roadway. And actually I can share my, looks like you might have to allow me to share my screen.
What's that?
All right. Yes, so hopefully you can see that here in the street view image. So there's a sidewalk here separated by the roadway by a slight asphalt berm in here. And particularly at nighttime, because there's no real separation in the color or the type of material, between the sidewalk and the roadway, it can be difficult for people to separate, to designate the edge of the roadway surface. And we noted some areas where people had clearly been driving up onto the sidewalk. So we did recommend that the applicant restripe this with an edge line that would be retroreflective, so it would be highly visible at nighttime. And they had committed to doing all of those low-cost improvements within the response letter that we received last night. We did still have some minor concerns about their trip generation estimate in relation to the number of van trips that they were estimating in their sensitivity analysis, that it might be slightly underestimated, but their analysis was showing that there's more than adequate capacity at all of the study area intersections. So we don't anticipate that that would be a big issue. And they are intending to provide a trip generation estimate once they do identify tenants. So if there is, one of those heavy van operations, that would be identified as part of that trip generation letter. And then they also have the post-occupancy monitoring study that would also verify those trips afterwards. So we do feel comfortable that their analysis does accurately show that there's no additional mitigation that's required beyond those low-cost improvements at the Gilboa and North Street intersection and the addition of the left turn lane that was mentioned at the site driveway as well. We also reviewed their updated plans. They provided a concept showing how van parking could be accommodated, and we were comfortable that their plans show there's adequate flexibility to accommodate parking for vans or trucks, depending on what type of tenant they do attract. We had provided some recommendations for the monitoring program, which it looks like in Vinod's presentation tonight were addressed with the adjustment to start the monitoring program 6 months after initial occupancy. Originally, they were proposing after full occupancy, and we would recommend that they do that after initial occupancy based on the fact that they may have multiple tenants and that tenanting may be phased over time so that they can verify the trip generation early in the process. And I think that was pretty much it for our comments at this point.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Just give Jeff Walsh an opportunity. Jeff, if you have anything that you would like to add, peer consultant from Graves Engineering for the 3 towns.
Thank you, Trish. The only thing I want to add, and I know the discussion this evening so far has been mostly on traffic outside the site, but while I've got everyone's attention, I heard discussion last public hearing about concern of the queuing in the on-site. And I know there was a brief discussion by Vinod earlier this evening, but what I'd like to recommend is that the applicant consider having his team maybe put together a plan or take the layout plan and show the not only show the turning maneuvers like were presented by VHB this evening, but show the number of trailer trucks that will queue and where they'll queue. Taking into consideration that vehicles will be queued around the corner, turning right from the main driveway onto the guide toward the guide shack. By my estimate, I counted maybe up to 11 trailer trucks, which is consistent with what was presented earlier by the applicant's team, I think at the last meeting. But nevertheless, in the plans I was looking at, I interpreted the exit lane as possibly a left and a right turn, but it wasn't clear on that. However, this evening in the VHB presentation, it was clear to me that there's one exit lane and the 2 entrance lanes and only a single exit lane at the very intersection where vehicles have to queue up and either wait to turn right or wait to turn left in the same lane. So that presentation this evening took away my confusion about 10 versus 11 queued vehicles. But again, it was a little confusing, and I think it would be helpful to the planning board members if they can see a picture of what's intended for the queuing and the number of spaces. That's all I have, Trish.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. So at this point, we're
This is Todd. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, Todd, go ahead. Sorry.
just so that issue doesn't hang out there, I appreciate the comment, Jeff, and we might be able to find it, but we may not. But on a previous occasion, we did show a slide that had the queue of the trucks, and I believe it was 11, and I'll let my team correct me if I'm wrong. If we can find that slide, we'll try to show it at some point tonight, but we did provide that at some point.
That'd be great. I appreciate trying to tie up as many loose ends as possible as we're moving along.
Right, it is 11 trailer truck start, and actually I have it on my screen. So I can pull that up if you want. Can I share my screen, Carrie?
You should be able to now.
So this is the graphic I believe that Todd is referring to. It's been modified to show the 3-lane cross section of the graphic that you might have seen before. Jeff was 2-lane section, but we have since, based on the feedback, we have modified the cross section to have the middle lane, which is the employee lane, the cars going to the employee parking lot, and then the right lane using the truck maneuver to the security location with the gates that can accommodate up to 11 trucks. We do not expect the number to be 11 trucks. It's just that the design can accommodate up to 11 trucks. The number, I personally, looking at the numbers in the operations and the analysis, the numbers would not get to this level for a facility like this, but it can accommodate up to 11 trucks.
Thanks, Vinod.
Thank you.
Great. So at this point, we'll work our way through the comments from each of the planning boards. And since Barry has his hand up, we'll start with Uxbridge. Barry, do you want to start? You have a comment, question?
Well, question. Rebecca Brown touched on it earlier. Can you provide a little bit more fidelity on the elimination of the van and the rationale why that was taken out of the equation?
Todd or Vinod, do you want to address that?
I can start and Rebecca can chime in. Barry, I guess the discussion was about, when we did not know who the tenant is and the site did not have separate van parking called out, the request was what happens if there are no vans as indicated on the site plans, and what happens if it was all trucks instead of vans. Those vans are all trucks. And that would increase the truck volumes, and that would change the distribution of the traffic within the study area. That could impact the turn lane that we're designing with an assumption of a mix of vans and trucks going in and out of the site. If it was all trucks, obviously the length of the turn lanes would still need to accommodate truck queuing. So the question was to present an alternate analysis where we had to show if there were no trucks, if it was 100%, if there were no vans and it was all 100% trucks, what would the operations look like? And that was the analysis we ran, and we were able to demonstrate that there was adequate capacity in the system. Should there be an all truck operation on this facility, it would still function within the parameters that we have used in the analysis.
So the answer is the all trucks presents a more worst case situation than the combination. Is that the rationale?
That was the expectation, thinking that it could be, but that was not the case. The truck plus van combination, it depends on where you're looking at the impact. Vans have more of a local distribution than trucks. So if you're looking at queue stacking or length of turn lanes, you would want to look at it from an all truck scenario. But if you're looking at, let's say, Gilboa Street at North Street, for example, the chances are that the vehicular operations there would have more vehicles going through that intersection if there was a van-based operation, because the vans would be going around on local streets. The other thing that I do want to mention, kind of tangential to this discussion on van-based operations, but again, that's not the intent, or we're not saying that we have a tenant who will have van-based operation at this point. We don't know that. But when you think about a van-based distribution, lot of those vans, I mean, if they are going into any of the towns here to deliver packages, let's say, those vans are already on these streets. And, a lot of times, it's not a new trip. It's just instead of coming off of 146 and traveling south, they may be coming from this facility if it was a van-based distribution. But again, at the end of the day, we assume that whether it's vans or trucks, they're all new trips to this area. And we have tested our analysis to make sure that there is capacity. And all of these vehicles are new vehicles, that they're not replacing any other trips that are already on the system.
But based on your historical experience, what represents the most likely situation?
It depends on the site, and that's why we have the sensitivity analysis. It depends on the final end user. We've bookended the operations. I guess it's 100% trucks versus a combination of trucks and vans. It's going to be somewhere in the middle.
But do you think it's accurate to say, I was going to say, I think the best way to sum this all up is the way we presented the TIA originally is how we expect the facility to operate. Based on feedback, we ran a couple of different sensitivity analyses to show if our assumptions were wrong in any way, what effect would that have on the road network? And what we've validated is, based on changing a few assumptions, it doesn't detrimentally affect the road network anyway. If you go to 100% trucks, if you go to trucks utilizing the local road network, I think those were the two primary sensitivity analyses we run. Either way, minimal to no impact on the roadway system is the takeaway. So I don't think this was something where we looked at it, felt uncomfortable with our original TIA, but this was all in response to comments we heard from either board members or GPI. Hopefully that helps kind of summarize what you were.
Great, thank you, Zachary, Vinod. Rebecca, did you have any other comment on that?
No, I think Vinod and Zachary explained it pretty well. Our initial concern was really that if it is a heavy truck-based operation, that trucks take a little bit longer to make their maneuvers, and so they can create additional delay. So our reasoning for asking for that analysis was to make sure that there wouldn't be a greater impact at the highway ramps and at the site driveway if it was entirely truck-based operations. So by providing the two different types of analyses, we're able to show that whether it is a van-based or a truck-based operation, the impact is still very minimal.
Great, thank you. Barry Desrousseau, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I'm trying to.
You're looking a little dark over there, but you're.
There we go. Yes, sorry. Again, and I've said this from day one. You guys have it set so you say you can get 11 trucks stacked in there. Realistically, it's 8 trucks in a line. That go from the guard shack straight all the way down. I measured out basically what you guys have for distance wise, and I kind of did the same thing for currently what we have in Uxbridge's BJ's. They are roughly almost identical in distance. This past weekend, I drove up toward BJ's and there were 5 trailer trucks waiting on Quaker Highway to access. Quaker Highway is a little bit different than Lackey Dam. It's a lot wider. It's a straight shot. No residents on that area. I just don't see how you guys have enough stacking in the event that, let's just say you have your 8 or 11 trailers and they're out to the road and someone is coming from 146 in a trailer and they go to make that left-hand turn. In the event that they can't make that left-hand turn because there are trailers stacked out to the roadway, where is that trailer supposed to go and make the turnaround? Because my guess is the next thing would be Oakhurst over in Sutton and then have to loop back out around and come around. I think that's going to be the biggest concern, for a lot of people in that area. The other side of it is, and I'm sure Douglas is going to jump all over this too, is the whole north. I guess you can say all you want on that intersection, but they're all going to take the left and head to the center of town, which then they have to merge into Main Street. I didn't see any analysis as to the time currently that it takes to merge into onto Route 16 from north, and how that all works. I mean, I think I think that right now we're at a guessing game as to, we don't know what it's going to be there, and we're not sure what's going to happen. Again, we in Uxbridge have had a lot of development. We've had a lot of trucks. I know I've talked to some people in Douglas, even with Medline, that the Medline trucks are coming in through 16, coming through their downtown over to 395. When we approved it, I mean, we never even honestly even thought about Douglas per se. Only because we were told the same thing. Everyone's going to hop on the highway, and that's the fastest and easiest way. And I think we as a town now are kind of looking at things a little bit differently, because Douglas is seeing an impact from the traffic that's coming from Uxbridge. And again, you know, here it is. Douglas doesn't have a very big downtown. They don't have a lot of room in there, and we're going to add another slew of trucks to come through their downtown. But I'll let Douglas harp on that. But anyway, those are my 2 cents for now.
Great, thanks, Barry.
So Trish,
Sure.
if you don't mind, we should respond to that to the extent that we can. So let me take the first part of the question, and my team can support me or jump in at any time. But Barry, your mention of the BJ's facility, you know, I know you've mentioned that before. And we did a little bit of looking at that to you know, kind of call out, you know, why maybe we're not the same here. And just a couple of just bullet point facts that we have digested and we thought were important. On the BJ's site, at least our information tells us they have 239 loading docks at that facility. Our facility is scheduled for 80 loading docks. So 239 on the BJ's site and 80 on this site. In addition, there's 560 trailer spaces on the BJ's site. On our site, there's, I think it's 250 trailer parking sites on our project. The reason we think is that they're just different. They have a different operation model than that we anticipate our tenant to have. So those certainly impact, you know, the level of activity you're going to have on the site, and then therefore, you know what the queue is going to look like. In addition, on the BJ's site, you have kind of a simple guard shack with a single lane of service. On this site, it's purposely a double lane of service with 2 service points, so that there can be quicker, you know, entry and processing at the gate with that concern in mind. So the queue at BJ's lengthwise, I think you're right. I think it's pretty equivalent from my recollection. They have around the same ability to queue there. But, you know, we think we're going to be able to process faster here. And because of the 2 lanes, and again, we think the volume is going to be not as substantial when you just look at the raw numbers. Again, 239 loading docks, we got 80. 560 trailer spaces, we've got 250. So we think it's a little bit of a different animal here. And I don't know, Vinod, if there's any additional information that's in your traffic analysis on Douglas that we could drill down on to talk about that. But, you know, we certainly looked at that Gilboa North Street intersection.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the comments about BJ's is spot on. I mean, yeah, we did, based on the last hearing, we did you know, a good amount of research to make sure we understand the differences, because again, you know, this canal does these sites all over the country, and you know, I would be surprised if you were to see a design that would end up causing the problems that you're describing, because we would have heard about it by now. But that said, again, you know, when you talk about distribution of traffic and whether, you know, Douglas downtown is going to be impacted, that in the intent of the analysis, I mean, you could chase every vehicle all the way through the system, you know, from where they start to the point they end up. And the way we would set up the analysis, again, with GPI's input, is to look at those key nodes, which are like the first point of contact. So the first point of contact, if someone wasn't getting on 146, the next key location that we would want to look at is the North Street Gilboa Street intersection. So we looked at that, and we did traffic counts, morning counts, evening counts. We looked at crash data as GPI described earlier. And then we added our assumed site-generated traffic, based on our traffic study assumptions. We put our traffic on that intersection, and the numbers, the impacts were nominal. Few seconds of additional, 7 seconds of delay. I mean, if you're driving through an intersection on day 1 versus day 2, and there was 7-second difference in the travel time, you wouldn't perceive that. A 2 or 3 car difference in queuing at an intersection one day versus other is not something that you notice on a daily basis. So we look at the numbers and say, okay, if there was a substantial impact at Gilboa Street, North Street, then we would go past that and say, okay, where does this traffic go beyond this point, and what would be the impacts of that follow-up look at where this traffic would end up. But when we have established that the North and Gilboa intersection, that the numbers are relatively small, both impacts and numbers, and then you go past it, the expectation is that it would be distributed even further, and the impacts are going to be even less. So, I mean, yeah, you can chase these numbers farther down, but you would look at the impacts and then define where that cutoff point is. And we were comfortable looking at Gilboa and North Street and saying that would be a reasonable representation of our numbers, and that's not a significant impact.
Thank you, Vinod. So let's, with that, maybe let's go to Douglas and ask if we have any comments from the Douglas Planning Board. Douglas, other
Can I just
further questions?
chime
Oh,
in?
sorry, Eli, I didn't see your hand up. Sorry.
I
Go
didn't put
ahead.
my hand up, but why don't we set a set of order of conditions like we did at our last approval that we did right off of 140, right off of 16 and 146. We set the order of conditions that no trailer trucks are allowed in downtown Uxbridge. So why don't we set order of conditions on this to not allow any trailer trucks to be allowed anywhere past 146. They have to go either north or south.
Great. There's a possible solution that we can come back to. Thank you for that. Anybody else anybody else from Uxbridge before we move on to Douglas? Thank you, Eli, Barry, and Barry. Douglas, further questions or comments about regarding Vinod or Rebecca or Todd's comments or Zachary's comments regarding the traffic and transportation presentation?
Yeah, we do have some. Yeah, we got some of the items here.
Go for it.
Let's see it there. So you talk about the low cost improvements.
If you guys, if you can state who's speaking, I think it'll help Jen with the minutes.
Les Stevens.
Thanks, Les.
Okay. Maybe now. All right.
Yep.
So you mentioned about the low cost improvements and that there'll be some signage, some painting lines and stuff like that. And you're calculating that we're going to roughly receive 10% of the traffic going west. It doesn't kind of jive. It doesn't work out. If you don't know your tenant, upon the operations, the volume that you guys did for your traffic study, you did it as a 67%, 33%. What you should really do is, since you don't know your tenant, you should do 100% trucks, one analysis, and another 100% vans. Okay? Because if you don't know your true tenant, what the volume is, you've got to figure out what your break point is. If we have 400 vans coming off this site and they're running a van operation, then you need the data point. So it's a little concerning that the data is looked at as a mix just to make the numbers work to satisfy the traffic, so we don't have anything that hits the red line. The other thing that was mentioned was there was no talk about alternate routes going west. Any other alternative solutions of, okay, if they went west, where do they go? What's the alternate route? Because if any of these vehicles have to service the west of us, in the Webster, Dudley, even Connecticut, if this is a truck-based company, out of here distribution, and they're shipping out to go to New York or to Connecticut, they're going to come through Douglas. So we're going to get about 25% easily of the traffic coming off the site. I think anything saying anything less than 25% is highly unrated. So the other big thing is that, you know, you guys talked about a post traffic monitoring program. Who holds that data? Who calculates that data? And where is that data to be available? That was never discussed. That should be discussed. Because if there's improvements out of that, or there are needs for improvements, you know, that has to be looked at a post-mortem. That's all I have.
Trish, let
Thank you,
us,
Yep,
let us
absolutely.
try to take on those items. So I think 3 separate comments, and probably Vinod has to handle most of it, but I'll just point out, you know, Vinod's sensitivity analysis, as he characterized it, did exactly what you were talking about and showed what it would look like if it was 100% trailers. Initially, it was a mix of vans, trailers. His new data, his new analysis, his sensitivity analysis, as he called it, is 100% trailers. And you saw his dissection of percentages there. And that's kind of how we got to those items.
I understand, but you didn't show the 100% vans. If
Right.
This is operation of vans.
If I can chime in on that. So when there is a van-based operation, it's not that the vans are gonna get the material. I mean, there needs to be trucks going to the site that bring the material from a regional hub, a larger facility that brings the material to the site, and then the material gets distributed onto vans for distribution. So that's the model that we used in the analysis. So when you say 100% vans, you can't have 100% vans, because there is trailer trucks have to bring material to that site to be distributed, and those trucks have to leave the site. So that was the analysis that we had used, and we said you had a van-based operation on the site, and trailer trucks are bringing material to the site, and then the material gets loaded, the packages get loaded onto the vans, and they get distributed within that market area. What would that distribution be? That was the basis of the original traffic study. And as Zachary mentioned earlier, that's a record traffic study, and we are saying that those are the numbers we are expecting for this facility. That would be the basis of our traffic monitoring condition. All the other variations, what if scenarios that we looked at are sensitivity analysis. That we're not saying that 10% of the trucks are going to go through Douglas, or that, you know, but those are all sensitive. What happens if those numbers were to occur? What would the impacts be is what we tested as part of the sensitivity analysis. The original traffic study numbers are what we went with.
But just to make sure we're getting back to what I heard is the heart of board member Stevens' comment. Is it accurate to say we picked these numbers based on, we did the initial study based on what we thought was reflective of the project. And then in coordination with GPI, we picked what the analysis was of the sensitivity, be it 10% van, 100% truck, and then got the results. We didn't say we have to max out at 10% vans in order not to impact the network. We ran the numbers based on what we thought was appropriate, and then found the results. And if the results said, you know, heavy impact mitigation is going to be required, then we would have addressed that. But that wasn't the case.
That is correct. I mean, the 10% was I would say it's higher than what we would expect to be for that percentage. But we picked it to say, okay, what happens if a higher percentage, like 10%, was to go through the Gilboa Street, North Street intersection? Zachary is right. I mean, we did not run the analysis and say, okay, let's do a cutoff at 10%. Or we could have said that at 5%. We could have done that at 2%. I mean, the numbers are relatively small, and most of them are going to be on 146 based on our calculations and estimations. But we said with 10%, this is what the results would look like, and it's not a substantial impact. Then there's always the post-construction monitoring and the pre-construction validation. There are other steps that we'll go through to make sure that these assumptions remain valid as we go forward.
And Vinod, that I think one of the Les's questions was, who holds that data, or how is that data accessed?
So that's the part of the drafting of the traffic monitoring condition that includes some, or the towns could choose to build in the specifics about how that happens. I mean, we haven't gotten to that stage yet, but typically a registered professional engineer like myself or Rebecca or anyone, a professional traffic engineer would prepare the analysis. They would collect the data. They would look at the original study and compare the numbers to what's actually happening in the field. And if it's part of the requirements, it'll get submitted to each of the 3 towns and to Mass DOT as part of the monitoring requirements. But the details would be spelled out as part of a condition.
Okay, great, thank you. Others from Douglas?
I'll just finish with this. If this site was to be a last mile warehouse, then you'd see significant traffic coming off this site. If it's a last mile warehouse, such as, bringing in 33% trucks in there and distributing it out to several carrier vans. So that's why I think the data is lacking in that aspect.
So let me.
I think it's lacking.
Okay.
Sorry, let me try to answer that. And Vinod mentioned it in his comments. The traffic analysis wasn't for a last mile facility, right? And I'm sure Rebecca could do a better job, or Vinod, than I of talking about this and teasing it out. But that is a completely different animal than what we're talking about in terms of the operation that we're proposing. And why we're talking about trailers is because it's a different operation. So what we talk about with the post-occupancy monitoring program is something slightly different. But what Vinod also mentioned in his comments was that we would present empirical data about what the facility, how it would operate once we know that tenant, right? And to the extent that we end up with something different than what we've proposed to you, we'll have to be back discussing with you how that would work, right? This is not intended to be that type of operation that you just described.
I think probably additional comfort comes from the fact of our application, right, is very specific to the type of use that we're looking for a special approval on. And I think in all 3 towns, and again, I'm not the land use attorney here, as Todd is and others, but I think their land uses are very well defined, explicit, that what we're getting permission for is not a last mile facility. So I'll let Todd correct me. I don't think we're able to do that with the approvals we're seeking out.
All right. So we could just have a document for the record that this won't be a last mile warehouse, and if it is, we would revisit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Zachary said, the application is very specific, right? The analysis that we've provided is very specific. And, we're happy to talk about, conditioning or looking at, what does it look like if we are something completely different as a tenant emerges.
All right, fair enough.
Thank you. Other comments from the Douglas Planning Board? And if so, please state your name.
Yeah, this is Mike Zwicker. How you doing?
Good.
I thank Barry for hitting the nail on the head on the traffic coming into Douglas. It's going to be a major point up there on 16 where it meets north. Couple other things, and this is with all due respect here. Nobody has mentioned anything about traffic on Central Turnpike coming in through Douglas. The other thing that I think, at least I am tired of hearing, is numbers. You give percentages. How about real numbers?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
We already know how many parking spots you have, how many docks you have. 10% of 50 trucks and 10% of 600 trucks is 2 different animals completely. So let's get rid of this percentage stuff and come down with real numbers on vehicles and counts, and not just a vague number being picked out of the sky, because that's really what's happening right now. We've asked for numbers. We've kind of said you got 3 shifts going. The potential just for employees in the parking lot was in the hundreds. Never mind the truck. So you take 10% of that or 30% of that and everything changes. Right now, everything's on the lowball side to make this work. Let's get real. We live here. The people in Boston don't. We have to deal with it once it's built. Thank you.
This is Aaron Sokrat, can I speak now?
Yes,
Trish?
Aaron, thank you.
So
Go ahead.
I concur with Mike, and Les sort of talked about 10%, 25%. I don't know what those numbers are. Is that 150 trucks if we're talking? I'm concerned about tractor trailers coming in through. I'm not as concerned about little Amazon vans or whatever they might be. But that bridge is narrow. That bridge would not make any DOT standards now if it was brand new, all planned out. People have to back up on that bridge for tractor trailers to come through. There are accidents there, crashes. That's Rebecca, you spoke about painting with the reflective paint along that curbing. And then I keep seeing low cost, short term. What about comprehensive? How about curbing on that sidewalk? So if a truck comes up on that sidewalk and there's curbing there, tires are gonna hit the curb, it's gonna protect the pedestrian. If you paint it and they're trying to take turns or somebody stops short, they're going up on that sidewalk, they're gonna hit a pedestrian. So I don't like seeing low cost, short term, minor. Minor is one of the terms here. Minor clearing of vegetation. Look at, nobody's against the project. This is good for the whole area. But let's be comprehensive. Let's not use terms like short term and low cost. Douglas has a series of crosswalks coming through on 16. This could be, a dirt road coming through the center of town. I mean, it is a tiny little road. And I'm concerned because there's the post office, there are churches, there's tons of pizza shops if you want them. And tractor trailers are going to be extreme coming down there. Barry, thank you as well for bringing that up. I just have a grave concern on what we can do to encourage the trucks to not come through there because it could be 25%, although we don't know what the real number is.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Any other,
Trish?
do you want to address that, Todd? Yes, thank you.
Just briefly, the comprehensive traffic study that was submitted with the project initially would contain all of that statistical data that I think you're looking for. It may be a little buried, so at some point here maybe we can tease it out. But I think the only other point I would make is your traffic consultant is on the line. I would love to maybe have some questions directed to her if you have them, because I think her ability to give you comfort should be greater than our team trying to deliver to you. So if you have specific questions, maybe they can be directed to her, or she can chime in on those particular items. But Vinod, I think at one point you did mention total trips from the site, and perhaps you could give some color to if it's a 10% number that we use going through Douglas, what does that mean? How many trips?
So yeah, I was going to use those numbers, Todd. Yeah. So the traffic study has the numbers. For ease of discussions, we're talking about percentages, but the monitoring studies and every aspect of the traffic study is based on actual numbers. It's not percentages. Percentages is just a way of communicating that information. So we have about the analysis. The traffic study is based on approximately 380 cars a day going into the site. And obviously at some point in the day, the employees, depending on shifts and shift changes, those people leave. So those are employee vehicles, 380. One way. And then van trips, we assume vans, about 150 vans. Again, over the course of the day, for analysis purposes, we said that those would be the vans that would leave the site during their morning departure if there was a van-based operation, and then they would come back at different times, later in the evening when they're done with their distribution. So that's about 150 vans. And when you take out those two numbers to support the employees supporting the operations and the number of vans, about 150 vans, we would need about 40 trailer trucks to support that operation. So that's what the traffic study is based on. 40 trailer trucks, 150 vans, and 380 cars. Then obviously you would multiplied by 2 if you have to look at it as a trip. Coming in is one trip, leaving is another trip. But those are the number of vehicles we're talking about. When you break that down into percentages, you take the 40 trucks, and 10% of that is 4 trailer trucks. They were coming, going through the North Street, Gilboa Street intersection. 10% coming back to the site, if they were to come through that intersection, would be 4 trailer trucks over the course of the day. So again, we're talking about small numbers. And the monitoring study and the decisions and your approvals, should we get to that point, is going to be based on these numbers. It's the traffic study numbers is what you're basing the reviews on and any post-construction monitoring. If the numbers are higher than this, if the numbers are off from this, depending on the type of operation or the end user, as Todd mentioned, that's what triggers the need to come back. That's where the traffic monitoring condition gets structured so that we are back to make sure that we adjust and make sure that the changes are adequately addressed as part of our follow-on work. Those are the numbers in the study.
I'm chiming back on this. So if that's the case, then at the end of all this, we're going to have written up specifically, there can be no more than 40 trucks a day, no more than 354 cars, period. Because this is what you're basing everything off of. So why don't we put that right in writing? Because we have no way ourselves of knowing how many trips and vehicles are going in and out, period. So it's a situation where either you go with the maps and figure it out that way, or in reality, you don't do it at all, or why have all these parking spots?
I know.
You don't need them. From what you're telling me right now, you're building too big of a parking lot. Correct?
No, one of the things, again, this is discussed in the response to comments that we have submitted as part of the responses to GPI's comments. A lot of time, the parking stalls are not turning over each day. Right, so a trailer truck could come in overnight, or drop the trailer on the site, or the truck can stay on the site for a day, 2 days, 3 days, or it might the cab might leave. It might take another trailer that's on the site that's already been loaded, and it would leave the site. So the fact that there are X number of parking spaces on the site does not automatically translate to X number of trucks going into the site and the same number of trucks leaving the site each day. It's a function of the operations of the facility. And that's where we use these statistics where we say, we have looked at enough of this. There are national statistics that say that an operation like this would generate X number of tractor trailer trips, so many employee trips. And that's what we base the analysis on. These are all based on national statistics. We're not making up these numbers. These come from national statistics. And the parking stalls almost always is not a direct correlation to the number of trips associated with the site.
Very frankly, the answer, very frankly, Mr. Zwicker, you're absolutely right. We've committed in writing a number of times that will either adhere to the traffic analysis through both evaluation before anyone's able to occupy the property, as well as after they're occupying with post, that we will hit these numbers or below, that we will not exceed them. So we've committed already in writing. I expect we'll continue to commit in writing. I expect, to your point, this is something that's going to become part of our approval. It's something that's already part of our approval with the state. So this is 100% an expectation y'all should have of us.
This is Aaron Sokrat again. I guess once the building is built, the horse is out of the barn. There's no control. It is what it is. We expect you to do terrific. If you have 4 tractor trailers come through Douglas a day, I said it before, you guys are not doing great business. I expect you guys to be, vigilant there, busy, turning trucks over, vans coming out, trucks coming in. You got 11 queues out of 80 trucks. You got 14% of the whole day as 11 queues for trucks coming in. If it was only 40 trucks coming in a day to you, you only need a queue of 2 or 3. I think you expect way more than you're telling us. And I'm glad for it, but we got to plan for it on our end. We are going to get crushed in downtown Douglas. People are going to take that shortcut, those trucks. I don't know what else to do here other than not having short-term, low-cost fixes. I mean, I just don't know the answer. We're scratching our heads over here. We're just kind of frightened about the downtown.
So, well, Les Stevens here. I just want to make the point that Barry made earlier. When Medline was proposed in Uxbridge, they said, oh, maybe 2 to 3 trucks going through Douglas. We are now looking at 10 to 15 trucks each day going through Douglas.
5 times.
Yeah, 5 times the number that they were quoted. So the two to three, for that operation, and that's more south of where you guys are. We're now, it's a higher volume, so that's what's just a little concerning.
Thank you. So I feel like there's some of this that will get incorporated into the conditions moving forward. So let's, if there's not something else, because I'm a little bit watching the clock here. I know we're committed to keeping this to 2 hours, and I want to give some ample time to the Sutton Planning Board to ask some questions, and then potentially, I think we have about 9 people in the gallery. So if it's all right with folks from Douglas, we'll move on to Sutton, and then.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So moving on to the Sutton Planning Board, Wally, Mike, Bill, do you have questions or comments to elaborate on that which you've already heard from Uxbridge or Douglas, stuff that's specific to Sutton, or even general comments? Michael?
Oh, sure. This is Mike Gagan. I just have a question about a lot of talk about monitoring the situation a year and a half, 2 years out. And you may have already answered this, so I apologize if you did, but if a year out, they find out the traffic counts for whatever reason, or whatever business went in there, are significantly different and are causing some major disruptions, is there a vehicle in place for the towns to come back to the business for them to pay for the major mitigation things that might have to happen to bring the counts down acceptable?
That's a great question. I don't know if Todd or I don't know if Jen or somebody in terms of the recourse that the planning boards have, post permitting, if there's a way to address that.
Yeah, I can actually answer that question for you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
When Mass DOT requires a post-occupancy monitoring study, there's usually a condition in there that's kind of a threshold. Typically 10% is the threshold that they use. So for example, if the trips coming in and out of the site were more than 10% of the projected, were higher by more than 10% of the projections, then they may look for additional mitigation. But as part of that monitoring study, they would also require that the applicant would have to do capacity analysis at the intersections to show what the operations are too. So if the capacity analysis didn't show any significant impact as a result of the additional traffic that was generated, then they likely wouldn't have to do any mitigation. Certainly the towns can put conditions in there for thresholds that require additional mitigation. So for example, if a movement were to exceed a level of service F, they would have to mitigate that. But it would also have to be linked to a condition that they actually generate more traffic too. So there could be background growth in the area that happens between now and when they get constructed. And they certainly shouldn't be anticipated to mitigate someone else's impact. So it would have to be a combination of, first, their driveway trips are higher than what was originally estimated. And second, there is some trigger met as far as an unacceptable operation at an intersection. And then they would be required to provide mitigation for it. So that type of conditioning is usually written into Mass DOT's monitoring program that will come out of that process, but the towns can also implement similar conditions if they would like.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. That's my only question at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Wally?
My question, we certainly understandably so heard a lot about the westbound traffic on North Street. I want to know what consideration, if any, was given to the westbound traffic on A, Whitens Road, and B, the Central Turnpike in Sutton, since they both sort of end up in the same place in Oxford on 395.
Great. Todd or Vinod, do you want to address that?
Sure. Yeah, based on our original analysis and the connectivity of the system, yeah, we would, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be 10% through North Street and 10% on White, 10% on, you know, right? It's that number that we used in the sensitivity analysis. And, you know, if it's not just North Street, then some of it would be on Central Turnpike, for example. But again, the overall number is again, for the sensitivity analysis, westbound travel, we said 10% is probably more than what it will be, but that's what we tested. So if it wasn't on North Street, then that 10% would be on Central Turnpike, for example, which is a wider facility that's capable of supporting truck traffic. And in fact, there's a lot more trucks on Central Turnpike, as you know, than on Gilboa Street.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jen, I know you've got connection there with Bill Talcott. Does he have any questions or comments?
I do not believe he has any at this time.
Thank you. So at this point, I don't know if Mike Gallerani from Uxbridge or Jen Hager from Sutton or Ian have anything to add to the comments from their respective planning boards. Just give you a little.
I do not. I think I addressed in the very beginning kind of the disconnect between the numbers in the original traffic study and what you saw on the plan started the confusion, I think, because we were talking about 380 cars, we were talking about 150 vans, and there's no van spots, and we're talking about 40 trucks, and there's a whole lot more truck spots. And I totally understand what Vinod's saying about, you know, you can have trailer back sitting in those spots, but that's a lot of spots if there's only 40 moving in and out. So I just think the site configuration compared to what was done in the original traffic study started the confusion, and then it just kind of went from there with the sensitivity analysis, trying to respond to comments. So really, I think we're kind of at a point where, you know, the boards need to decide if they're feeling strongly enough about the traffic that they would, you know, disapprove the project based on not feeling good about the traffic study, which is it's tough because you do have a hired traffic consultant who has reviewed this and made her commentary, or if we can address the concerns through conditions. So I think we just need to think about that and maybe have some communication about that, so we can decide where traffic should go.
Thanks, Jen. Ian, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't really have anything else I want to add. The only thing that I had in mind was stuff that I talked with Tracy Sharkey about at our last planning board meeting, but I believe that was all addressed by the other members of the Douglas Planning Board. And this is something that we'll have continuing conversations with in order to, make sure that we're addressing it the best of our ability. But that's about it that I have right now.
Great, thanks, Ian. And Mike Gallerani from Uxbridge, anything you want to add?
I agree with the Uxbridge Planning Board members, and I think, I'll echo what Jen said, that the conditions that the planning boards put forward are going to be key to this, but I hate to lose this project over traffic situations that I think we can address through the conditions. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. So at this point, I want to open it up. Carrie's going to help me open it up to, so I think we have about 8 or 9 people in the gallery to see if there's some other comment from the general public. So as we do this again, just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. As you're recognized, if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll recognize you. We'll give you about 3 minutes. Please state your name and where you're from, which town or organization you're representing. Please do your best not to repeat comments that have already been made. If it's something unique and substantive, please feel free. But in the interest of time, let's not be excessively repetitive about the comments that have already been made. So with that, Carrie, do we have anybody who has their hand raised that would like to make a comment or ask a question?
Oh, we do have one. Tracy McNeil, it looks like.
And Tracy, we're going to promote you to a panelist so you can ask your question live.
Let's get a address.
Let's see if she can unmute first. Oh, there you go.
Oh, now you moved it. Okay, there you go.
Tracy, can you state your name and your address, please?
Yeah, this is Jim McNeil, and I'm Uxbridge. And
55 Lackey Dam.
55 Lackey Dam. We're right down from the entrance. Now, my concern is in the wintertime, I have trouble getting out of my driveway, even during the summer. I mean, I have to back in to be able to pull out. During a shift change, there's going to be, 100 cars coming out of that parking lot? Could be going either direction. Am I going to have to wait a half hour to be able to get out of my house? So that would be one concern. The other concern I have is I know North Street, there's a stop sign to get onto 16, and I know this already been mentioned, but that is normally a wait to get out of there now. You add more traffic, it's going to be worse. That's all I have for now.
Thanks, Jim. I think there's a way to lower your hand too. Do we have another hand, Carrie?
Not at this time.
Great. So with that, I feel like just see if Todd has anything else he wants to add here. And then I think the rest of the discussion will be kind of how we proceed forward. My sense is that there will be some conversations within each individual planning board about kind of what their perception is on the comments and the presentations that are made, if there are conditions, and how they want to proceed with the permits and possible waivers. But Todd, do you have a kind of a closing set of comments or thoughts?
So, I had some thoughts to put together for the group, but really where I think we are, we've kind of gotten through the meat of all the discussions on the various disciplines. We've talked throughout the process of adopting certain recommendations, such as Rebecca's comments from GPI, which Vinod mentioned in his presentation, in terms of conditions of approval, the Gilboa North Street improvements, the left turn lane as examples. We also talked about some of those items when we talked about sound, and we talked about the sound wall and the construction of that. We talked about certain usage restrictions on the East Dock area, and we talked about certain other restrictions there with regard to the sound and the operations. So our thought is that those items that we talked about and have agreed to throughout our process here would be appropriate items to be conditions of approval. And so at this point, in addition to discussing the waivers, we feel like we'd like to try to move to a conversation about, conditions of approval, those waivers, and any items that, the boards feel like we have not addressed or agreed to throughout our process, but to try to wrap those into trying to make a decision here. So, excuse me. We have 3 different boards to deal with, so this gets a little hard to navigate. We have certain waivers pending in Sutton, a waiver pending in Uxbridge, and we have, obviously we have independent applications in each of the municipalities for various things. So we've got site plan review in Douglas and earth removal in Douglas. Uxbridge, we have a special permit and site plan. In Sutton, we have 2 special permits, site plan and earth removal. So, we do need to kind of hit all of those items when we talk about decisions. We're happy to do it in this joint forum. I know, Jen Hager's talked about this in the past, and trying to bifurcate the process may get even sloppier than trying to do it all here collectively. But if this is the will of the group, we're happy to talk about conditions and start to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Great, thanks, Todd. Jen, you've unmuted yourself. Did you have a comment?
I just want to point out a lot. I had asked in the last meeting that the applicant provide a written response to comments, to board member comments, to comments we received in writing, other than the ones they'd been providing along the way to the peer review consultants. And we did get those starting about 5:45 last night through this afternoon. So I would suspect that not many of the board members, if any of the board members, and maybe even not the peer review consultants, have had an opportunity to read through those. I will say that I feel like what I'm seeing, because I haven't even read through them all the way, is that the applicant did attempt to answer in writing concerns that were expressed to date. So I wish we'd gotten those a few days earlier so we could come into this meeting and we could ask board members, you've got the response to your comment. Is there anything else you need or need to see? Or do you have a follow-on comment or question? But I don't think we're in a position to do that, unfortunately.
Does it make sense to have the boards kind of, we've been meeting every other week jointly. Does it make sense for the boards to kind of consider their own situations independently and then bring that back for kind of joint discussion at a future meeting? I recognize that, this is a lot of information we've received this evening, and then there was some information that was provided in writing the day before, immediately before this meeting. So that might need to be digested so that there's actual kind of some time to kind of consider what those conditions and might be moving forward. So thoughts on that as a possible scenario to move forward?
Sure. I would suggest it might be good if we can schedule the next joint meeting, and then see, I'm just trying to think of legally, for boards to kind of break and discuss with each other. Are you continuing? Are you having a working session? Are you just continuing? There's a lot of legal issues there. We do have at least 2 land use attorneys in the room.
So, Jen, we could talk about having workshop sessions with, not a majority of the board members in order to start to get to some language on conditions, because it is a little hard to do it in this setting. And we could then reconvene. That's kind of my concern,
is that in this setting, it's really difficult to kind of say, well, are we asking them to limit it to 40 or to 30 or to 20? But there needs to be kind of a concrete kind of proposal that's brought before, and each board separately, obviously, but in a combined hearing. So.
Well, I don't have town council sitting here, so you're the counsel for the applicant. So if you get this answer wrong, his whole process is messed up. So, would it be legal to have, say, 2 members of each board, or not a quorum of each board, sit with staff or whatever, or staff and or consultants, whoever they want, and do a number of things. The first thing is to make a list of anything that they still feel like they don't have the answers to, or they still feel like they need more information on. One of the things I was thinking about is one of your response to comments said you're pulling 50,000 cubic yards, I believe it is, of material off the site. You need at least an earth removal exemption, depending on if part of that's coming out of Sutton. And you probably need an earth removal permit from at least one other community. And part of our permit, and I don't know if part of the other permit is, you have to tell me how many truck trips that is, how long in duration that operation is going to be, where that material is going to, et cetera. And we haven't heard any of that. And I don't think that's anywhere. So that's just one thing. We heard some comments on the sound wall in the last meeting, how it's going to be PVC. What we got was kind of a blurry thing. I've done a little bit of research and have some images of different kinds of sound walls, and maybe that's an offline discussion with the applicant to come up with something that's acceptable. But I think I forget who said that in the last meeting. One of the board members asked about, you know, a concrete or at least more attractive
Sound wall.
So there may not be huge things like, you know, traffic concerns, but there's a bunch of little things kind of hanging out there. I think we need that list after we finish reviewing the 18 documents that came in less than the last 24 hours. So is it legal, Todd? Less than a quorum of each board with staff and or consultants?
That was the workshop concept, right, Todd?
Yep, I would suggest that it be with staff and you know, probably one board member, but I do believe that is possible. Yes.
We've got hands raised by Eli from Uxbridge, and we also have a hand up from the Douglas Planning Board. Let's start with Eli since he's the top left of my screen.
I just want to concur with Jen about getting documents in at the 24th hour. Typically when we have our meetings and a developer or somebody comes in within 24 hours of our meeting, we just continue it without a discussion so we can read it. And especially when it's this many documents, we get it. Some of us have, pretty much all of us have full-time jobs, and this is a voluntary thing. And we're getting all that information in first thing this morning, and I'm working all day long. So there's nothing I could even look at. So, and I know a couple other board members said the exact same thing also on our side.
Thank you, Eli.
No, we appreciate that. So, and you know, we're sorry about the lateness of those letters. I did make a point earlier just to kind of say most of those letters were really just reiterating things that we had covered in the meeting. And it was more to provide a written record of those comments. You know, for instance, where, you know, how do you mark town monuments and things of that nature? That's all things we talked about, and it's on the site plan. And there wasn't a whole lot of new information in there, and we covered those items tonight. But we appreciate the comment, and I fully understand that folks didn't get the chance to review those. And we're not asking to close the public hearing tonight. So certainly, you know, we understand that those went in, and there may be, you know, a review of those and questions, and that is, you know, that's okay. You know, we're not saying that this is, you know, the end of any discussion on anything at this point. We're just trying to set up next steps.
All right.
Thanks, Todd. So wait, just real quick, Jen. So Douglas has their hand raised, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Douglas?
Yeah. Les Stevens here. You know, I think we would be okay with, you know, I talked to members of the board, seemed like they're okay with this as well, is if the applicant came to our next regular board meeting and we're working on the draft decision regarding the items that were covered for our town. And you could work with our consultants offline to work on those draft decisions. But I think it would be in our regular normal meeting to have our back and forth discussions on that draft decision. We meet every 2 weeks, and these meetings are in between those weeks. So we're meeting every Thursday night in this room. So
Great. Thank you, Douglas.
So also one thing from Douglas, as was
Sure.
just mentioned about the sound. The decibel readings on the backup alarms were never confirmed at the last one. So decibel alarms, which I say are louder, is correct. The whole study there is pretty much flawed on the backup stuff. And we haven't seen anything on that either.
So Aaron,
That is one of those items that was actually responded to in writing, which we did not cover tonight. So I know our sound consultant is not on the line, and perhaps someone on our team could pull up the response and go through that. But I understand that.
Okay.
So just to Aaron Sokrat to piggyback quickly what my comrade Les had talked about, is that at our next meeting or a regular meeting on the agenda, we could have Ian there, who is our planner at this point, and have maybe Rebecca Brown online, and we can ask questions of them in order to help them clarify how we build our order of conditions so that we can help satisfy your timetable. So if we have the right people in place, that we can do something like that. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Aaron, so you're not really comfortable kind of doing that with one or two members with the staff and the consultants offline? I'm just worried about messing up.
All together, one for all for one. Kind of thing.
Okay, I'm just worried about messing up the hearing process in terms of legality.
Remember, we only have Ian for 8 hours a week. That's it.
Total.
That's all you get.
I mean, no, we need
want
more.
I know you want more.
A real different situation than the other printer boards. Well, we have nobody. I mean, we have
no full-time staff.
We have no full-time staff on nothing yet. So
I think Uxbridge is challenged as well.
We're caught in the middle on this deal.
So from the applicant's perspective, we're happy to come meet with Douglas, and I'm sure we can work out a time that works. I didn't catch your schedule fully, but my thought is we'd come into you at some point in the next maybe 2 weeks or so, and I'm sort of getting the sense that we need to move this joint process out maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks even, to get to the point where if we are doing those individual meetings and we come back to a joint and make sure that the decisions aren't contrary to one another, and conditions are similar across the board, and we can work out any of those differences at that point.
That's kind of my sense as well.
Todd and
go
Rebecca,
ahead, Ian.
Sorry, Todd and Rebecca, I will reach out to you in the next day or early next week, as well as reaching out to the planning board clerk, Maria LaJoy, in order to get you onto the schedule. So they meet every second and fourth Thursday of the month. So we've got time to get you onto the next planning board agenda to have this discussion and be able to, sort of go through some of these remaining details.
Okay, and that's great. I'm happy to do that. I think before we leave here tonight, we do probably need to find that time and date certain so that we can continue the process. So I know it's a little cumbersome, but if we could just nail that down as to when that might be.
Talking about the town hearing, you mean?
I think he's looking for the Douglas Planning Board hearing.
Right.
Specifically.
All right.
Do you have that date, Ian?
So Todd, I just want to make sure we don't screw this process up in terms of legality. So
yep.
What are we going to continue this? We've got 3 public hearings going on right now in one forum. So are you going to continue, say, the Douglas out to a date and the Sutton out to a date and the Uxbridge out to a date, so those individual discussions can take place with the majority of the board members in individual meetings, and then come back into, have them continue back into kind of a day where we're all meeting again? Is that what's going to go on here? Because I don't see another legal way to do it.
Yeah.
Douglas likes that.
So when we go through the motions at the end of this, Douglas will continue theirs to one date, Uxbridge will continue theirs to another date, and Sutton will continue. And then at the end of each of theirs, they'll need to continue their hearing to the future 3-town planning board hearing date. Does that sound right, Jen? Is that what you're getting at?
Otherwise, what are you doing? Otherwise, you're kind of deliberating on something outside of a public hearing with a majority of board members, which I don't, yeah.
If I could just add, Trish, I think if each board can identify when they can see us next, and then if collectively we can agree on what everyone's going to then continue that meeting to, that we'll all come together, then we'll all basically think of it as going into working sessions for each town individually and come back collaboratively on the date we agreed to this evening.
But each of those working sessions will still be a sub part of
It's
this
a public hearing.
Yeah, right,
It's
okay.
a public
Just wanna
hearing.
confirm that, yeah. So in looking at a calendar now, we're sitting here on April 29th. The next Thursday would be, if I have this correct, would be Douglas's regular planning board hearing?
The 13th. And correct me if I'm wrong, any members of my board, but the next planning board meeting for Douglas will be Thursday, May 13th at 7 p.m. I don't know what else we have on the schedule so far, but we can definitely make sure to put you onto that schedule.
Thank you.
Yep, that would be great.
Does that sit well with the Douglas Planning Board?
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay, and let's do kind of the same exercise. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
I do have a conflict on that night, but I did check the schedule and it looks like Jim Noyce could attend that meeting that night from my office. He's obviously been involved in this project since the beginning too. So he should be able to attend that night if that's okay with the applicant and with the town of Douglas.
Yeah, but between now and then, you know, if the discussions in certain parts of the decision can be underway, that'd be a goal.
Great. So let's do the same exercise with Sutton. Sutton, is this something that you can put on a planning board meeting in the very near future and at what date?
Not very near. We have May 3rd is our next meeting, which obviously you're not getting on that meeting. And then we have our annual town meeting with no less than 17 to 20 planning board articles in mid-May. So the soonest we could see you, if the members are comfortable with it, is May 24th.
And Rebecca, how does that fit in the GPI schedule there?
Sorry, I had it muted. May 24th is fine. Yep.
Wally, Mike, Bill, via your text or phone.
Good with me, Jen. Wally.
And Todd, does that work with your team?
I mean, look, that's the best they can do. That's great. We'll be happy to be on their calendar and on the agenda for that night. And perhaps Jen and I can communicate in the interim about a little bit more about process so we can make good progress on that night.
Great. And Uxbridge, Mike, Uxbridge, what would be a future planning board hearing date for you guys?
Well, I know, Trish, that we're pretty, we've got a pretty full schedule. The next meeting we have, which a good chunk will probably get continued to the following one. Our next meeting is going to be the second week of May.
So that's the 13th. Is that a Thursday?
That's a Wednesday. There's no way that we could. There's no way we could discuss this. I mean, we are only because we had a meeting last night, and every single item that we had was continued.
What about the 26th? Moving. Are you guys every week or every 2 weeks?
No, we're every 2 weeks, and the 26th is. You know, a lot of these items are just kind of getting on our books right now. And I'd like to give this plenty of time, but we have a lot of development that's going on right now that's on our plan. So, I mean, I guess I could say the 26th. Otherwise, you're looking second week of June. right now. We just have so much stuff. And again, we're on limited staff like Douglas also. I mean, we don't,
Right.
you know,
So that would
everything's
be,
pretty limited.
so either
You know,
June 20, May 26th or June 9th, is that would that be
yeah.
the follow
Yep.
on? So if, can
Yep.
we tentatively put it on for the May 26th, and if you need to continue it, then that would be an option there.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess we can do that. Let's throw it on for the 26th, and then, you know, we'll see how things pan out. I mean, we'll know, you know, the next week
You
or so,
guys
I
can-
guess, if
yeah.
we get more information on some of these developers.
Is that
Yeah.
like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or some?
At 7 o'clock Wednesday.
So everybody will have to do a time and date certain, and then Barry, if anything goes sideways with that, you'll have to, of course, vote to continue that in that open meeting to another date.
Right.
Are all these 7 p.m. meetings? They are, yes.
Yeah.
All right, so what I have is, I'm going to get a motion from Douglas to continue their portion of this public hearing to May 13th at 7 p.m. Actually, it probably makes sense for us to look further out into June for a next date for the 3-town public hearing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, so I would suggest, you know, if we can look at a date, you know, that's in the early part of June there, maybe June 10th as a Thursday. That's kind of what we've been doing, but I don't know if that's a conflict for folks.
We have a conflict on June 10th with CMRPC being at our annual meeting. But the
Third?
Well, I think one of the option for Uxbridge is, if it had to continue from May 26th, would have been June 9th. Is that right, Uxbridge? If they needed, so I would hate to have to continue that. So if we look out toward, I'm thinking the middle of June, maybe June 16th or June 17th.
17th would probably work for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be the third Thursday.
And Douglas, that was all right with Douglas? Sutton was all right? Uxbridge?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. All right, so the motion for Douglas will be to continue to May 13th at 7 p.m. and then continuing back to the 3-town planning board hearing on June 17th at 7 p.m. The
I'm just
motion.
gonna bring that to 7:30 because we know 2 things on our agenda.
Sure.
At 7.
Trish, I don't know that we need to do that. Do we want to even do that second part of that motion, especially if we don't know if Uxbridge is going to have to continue out to another?
If I might, I
Sure,
think
Mark.
what we're looking to do is agree while we're together what it will be.
Right.
And each board, whether it's on the 13th, the 24th, the 26th, or otherwise, will at the end of that meeting continue to June 17th.
No matter what.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah, all right. So moved.
All right, let's, so are we good to?
Douglas, let's look. From
Who's making the motion in Douglas?
Mike.
We'll continue the open hearing, May 13th at 7:30.
And adjourn this meeting?
For Douglas, then continue on to June 17th at 7 p.m. for the Tri-Town meeting.
We don't need that second part, but we're hoping you're going to adjourn this meeting in the same. Do we need to can we do this all in one motion? We can.
Do it all in one, so we don't be at both meetings.
All right, so we had a motion from
Mike Swicker.
and a second from,
Les Stevens.
thank you, and we'll do a quick roll call vote for the Douglas. Ernie Marks,
Aye.
Tracy Sharkey, was she able to join us?
No.
Mike Greco,
Aye.
Jacob Schultzberg,
Aye.
Aaron Sokrat,
Aye.
Les Stevens,
Aye.
Mike Zwicker.
Aye.
The motion carries in Douglas to continue this public hearing back to Douglas on May 13th, beginning at 7:30, and to adjourn this meeting this evening.
Yeah, I just want to chime in.
All right, and do I have a think Jim's got some,
Mike made a motion to adjourn, Mike Zwicker.
yes.
For us.
Yeah.
I second it, Aaron Sokrat.
Okay, we're gonna go back through that. Ernie Marks,
Aye.
Tracy Sharkey, nothing here. Mike Greco,
Aye.
Jacob,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Les,
Aye.
and Mike Zwicker.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's